Hey guys, so we're back with Branden. And I wanted to ask you, so you made Aliyah and now you're in rabbinical school, you're starting at Pardes, if I remember correctly. What made you want to become a rabbi? Like, in the past 3 years, it sounds like you've gone through such a journey, and how did you get here?
I will say, kind of going back to what you mentioned earlier, that has not been a direct or specifically easy decision or journey. I initially came to study in Israel because I was considering rabbinical school, and then after spending time studying in a yeshiva, I was like, maybe rabbinical school is like not what I want to do. I think a big part of what motivated me originally to consider rabbinical school was my experience working in the congregation that I worked at in Houston. It's a small staff. I worked directly with the clergy team as well as the executive director. And I kind of saw the behind the scenes of specifically a pulpit rabbi and like what that means. On the one hand, it means being there for significant life cycle moments when, a family in the community decides to get a divorce and you issue the get and you have to seek witnesses for a get. When somebody in the community or somebody coming into the community is converting and you get to oversee their conversion. And there's some really powerful moments in the lives of the community that you get to play a significant role in. And that was incredibly meaningful. And I was like, wow, that's the type of work that I would love to do. As somebody who's passionate about education and who sees my role ultimately being as an educator, to go in and ask the rabbi a question one day and have him say, wow, do you know how often it is that somebody comes in and asks me a question about the Talmud? Never. It's like, okay. I also saw that aspect of it, and it's just like, oh, so if I'm interested in being an educator, maybe becoming a rabbi is not the right track, because if I end up in a position like this, there's going to be, limited opportunities because of limited interest or whatever myriad reasons could exist that I would actually get to do that aspect of the job, which is ultimately, I think, for me, why I would want to pursue it. And even after, making Aliyah, after coming back to Israel, I came back not expecting to go to rabbinical school. I was starting my master's degree in Jewish education and was really focused on this idea that I think it's really important that there are qualified Jewish educators who are not specifically rabbis. I think that is very important, and I think that there will always be a role for Jewish educators who are not rabbis. That being said, for me, not only do I love being a teacher, but I also love being a student. And for me, the motivation to learn, I don't think will ever go away. And when I think about being a Jewish educator, a master's degree in Jewish education is not going to provide me with the significant background and breadth of knowledge in terms of Jewish text, Jewish philosophy, scholarship, even modern writings and just, teshuvot and all of those different things. It's not going to give me in 2 years what I could get in 5 years of a more intensive program that really does kind of address the breadth of the whole, what it means to be a real Jewish educator, really what the role of the rabbi historically has been. I don't necessarily see myself being a pulpit rabbi unless I find some incredible job that pays me a stupid amount of money to work at, no, not here. It's probably be in America because it's a very different beast here. But, ultimately for me, I'm an educator. That's what I want to be. At least in terms of the goals that I have set for myself, I think that becoming a rabbi educator is the best way to achieve those goals. And the programs that I'm in make it much more feasible to pursue that goal, then I think if I were approaching it differently, it would be like if I had just come straight from undergrad, I think it would be much more of a challenge than it is now. Like, I was in one program that seamlessly kind of went into another program, which is kind of seamlessly going into another program. And I've learned in the years of working with the different schools that like they're very willing to work with you in terms of developing an individualized curriculum and working with you on the schedule that you want to work with. And really, whereas I think the undergraduate experience is largely we just want bodies in the university so that we can get our like money, get you out the door, and just whatever. You really learn something when you go to graduate school just about the actual, when you pick a subject, when you pick something that you really want to study intensively, it's completely transformational in a certain respect. And you just really develop a much more personal relationship with it. And as you work in that field and you meet people who are similarly passionate about these things and you start making those connections, like things really start to open up, because you have that like dedication. I think for a long time before I got into the Jewish communal space and the Jewish like professional world, a lot of it was I felt just like I didn't belong because I wasn't, like my value system didn't align with the types of like jobs and things that I was pursuing, and I was pursuing them just because it was like I have to make a living, I have to support myself, like whatever. And it wasn't until I found something that I could actually match like my personal values to the way I support myself and the way ultimately I hope to maybe one day like support a family and like all of those different types of things. Like I think that those things are really deeply connected and they ultimately have a way of working out the way that they're supposed to. But for a lot of people it takes a really long time to get to that point. And for me, when I graduated university at 23, I wasn't in the same place, obviously, physically, mentally, spiritually, like all of those things that I am now.
Yeah. And it's like, I'd ask, what would be your like ideal situation? You finish your rabbinate degree, now you're Rabbi Yonah, or however you would want to be considered. And what do you see yourself doing? Meaning, you said that you want to be an educator, but I feel like we could play hypotheticals again. And what would be, let's say, like your dream job as a Jewish rabbi educator?
So first of all, I'll address the name thing because this is something that's come up even in the recent past. So when I first went to the conservative yeshiva, when I showed up, they had made a name tag for me with my Hebrew name. So I was like, all right, I'll try going by my Hebrew name. And then I kind of just went by my Hebrew name. Decided to go with that for, I think, over a year. Because even at camp last summer, I went by my Hebrew name. I actually decided to start going by my English name again. Partly because even here in Israel, I've had multiple experiences when I introduce myself by my English name when people tell me that it is not a Jewish name. And I have a problem with that. Because I'm Jewish, and that is my name, so hence it is a Jewish name. Sure. And that, to me, is, like, not a question. That's really up for debate. Yeah. But also, generally these comments are coming from, like, older Ashkenazi folks who, when confronted with somebody from, like, Morocco or something like that with a name that's completely unfamiliar to, would they also say, like, oh, that's not really a Jewish name?
Yeah.
So I have a problem with that, and just the idea that there has to be some type of like homogeneous, like Jewish, red Ashkenaz Jewish identity, especially in Israel. But so I decided to start going by my English name. One, because I want to be Rabbi Johnson, because I think that's baller, and so people need to get used to it. But also just because it's one thing to go through the process of conversion and to become Jewish and experience being Jewish in the context of living amidst people who are not Jewish, but then to be Jewish, living amongst a majority that are Jewish, who then also don't necessarily perceive you as Jewish because of something like your name. That's like a very challenging experience as well. But one that I think is important to address, and ultimately why I chose to start going by my English name again. Also, I think that there is something really powerful in using my Hebrew name, the name that I chose for very specific reasons related to my conversion process and my relationship with Judaism, that I only go by for like smachot, like if I'm being called to the Torah, if, you know, Baruch Hashem, one day I'm standing under the chuppah, like those types of things, like I want that to be that type of a moment. Now going back to your question. So the track that I'm on right now, it'll be another year studying at Pardes. Then it will be matriculating into the rabbinical school, and then there will be a commitment for me to teach in a day school. I really love education, and that's like my strong suit is teaching. So, you know, teaching in a day school for a few years, I think whether it be teaching in a classroom or serving as Rav Beit Sefer, or like whatever it is, I think that that's a great transitional role between like graduating from this and moving into the professional world of being a rabbi. Ultimately, I think I see myself working more in like more advanced education, whether that be at the collegiate level, whether that be for adults, whether that be coming back to Israel and working at like Pardes or working at the conservative yeshiva or some place like that, but educating people who themselves are preparing to either they're already involved in like Jewish communal leadership and Jewish education, or they're themselves preparing for like the rabbinate or something like that. But helping prepare that next generation of Jewish leaders, I think would ultimately be where I see myself going professionally.
Wow.
But again, like, you never know. If I look back a decade ago, I was preparing to move to South Korea to teach English for a year, and I would have absolutely no idea that 10 years from now I would be in my apartment in Jerusalem talking about rabbinical school and like all of these things. So, yeah, I mean, I have a path somewhat laid out in front of me, but what exactly it looks like, I'm not entirely sure. And I think it's kind of nice having some idea of where it's going, but also being open to the fact that it'll probably look completely different by the end of it than it does right now.
Well, I feel like my last question to you would be, what would you want to say to a person or, you know, someone who is converting, going through the process, and or someone who already converted and wants to come to Israel and is kind of going through that hardship, that confusion that you went through as well? Like, what would you want to say to them or to yourself when you were going through that?
I think one of the most important things to remember that you and I talked about before this interview was something that actually one of the rabbis on my Beit Din said to me, and that was like the whole process of getting to the point where now you are Jewish is not like that in and of itself is not the end. That's simply the beginning of something much bigger. And I think there are a couple of different ways you can go forward. You can either say, okay, now I'm Jewish. That's good enough for me. I'm going to continue doing exactly what I've been doing in life, but now I'm just doing it as a Jewish person. And that's totally valid and a beautiful thing. You can also take it and say, there's a whole world in front of me that I've only scratched the surface of, and maybe I'm interested in learning more, even if it's just about one specific aspect of it. The beautiful thing, not the one beautiful thing, but I think one of the beautiful things about Judaism is the more you learn about one aspect of it, the more that you touch 100 different other aspects of things. For example, when I was doing my conversion process, the rabbi that I studied with required like a capstone project of some type. And you had to pick like a subject, a topic, an idea that you were particularly interested in, and then learn more about it, practice it if it was something to be practiced. Just familiarize yourself with it. Think about what it meant to you personally. And so I chose kashrut because that was something, like, as somebody who loves to cook, I was just like, I really want to learn more about this. And you really, especially when you get into something like food and, you know, how broad and diverse the Jewish community is, you learn that there are different customs, there are different approaches to kashrut, whether you're coming from like an Ashkenazi community or a Sephardi community or a Mizrahi community. Like, there's all of these different ideas and variations, and they all touch on different aspects of halacha. They touch on different aspects of minhagim from these different places. And it's just such a fascinating, I think for me, the biggest thing I would recommend or say to somebody is just never stop learning. Like, it takes an incredible amount of energy and time and commitment just to get to the point where you can actually legitimately call yourself Jewish. And to end it there, I think, would be doing a huge disservice to yourself, but also to the Jewish community. So I would say never stop learning, always ask questions. And yeah,
that's amazing. I feel like you touched upon very Jewish values, like, in everything that you said. Even just like keep asking questions is something that is one of the most integral things that I know, like, as a person who grew up Jewish, like, that's one of the main things that we're taught throughout our lives is, like, never stop asking. And I feel like that's maybe one of the most Jewish blessings you can give someone coming into the Jewish world and the Jewish community, is just, like, take that, because you have to always be curious. Anyways, I want to say thank you so much. This has been an amazing interview, and I know that I've learned a lot about you and just about what it takes to convert and to come to Israel and all of those complexities. And I feel like even just one person who listens and feels a little bit heard and understood and connects is worthwhile. So I want to say thank you for everybody. And
thank you again.
Hope to see you guys soon at our next podcast.